Well, how is everybody tonight? Good. Good and fine. Can't beat that. All right. As Dale mentioned, Sunday we're beginning a study tonight in the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel. I kind of envision this going all the way till our summer series. That's going to be 5 months. So I think that's probably a good way. We may finish early and do some topical things just before, but that's kind of what I'm looking at. So what we've been doing on the Minor Prophets was an overview of each book. I'll start with that tonight. We'll just kind of overview the book, and then we will spend a little bit more time. Probably, I don't know. It just depends on the topic. Depends on how in depth we want to go. I'm thinking maybe 2, 3, or 4 chapters each class period. Of course, the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel are narratives, much like the book of Acts, for example, in the New Testament. It tells a story. It tells about events. And so that's different from a book like the book of Romans or Hebrews, where you have a different type of writing. So we'll be looking at it in that way. And I encourage you, if you have not done so already, to read at least the first part of the book. Kind of get the idea of what is there and refresh your memory concerning it. Let's go ahead and jump in. Should I let him? Ruby's not sure. Yeah, go ahead, Calvin.
And I know everybody knows this, but especially doing this study, if you go on YouTube and get what's his name to read it for you, it just helps a whole lot.
Alexander Scorby?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody can do that.
Yeah.
It helps.
One of the things that I did in our Minor Prophets study is I listened to somebody reading, and I picked a couple of different translations. Scorby will be the King James Version. I found one very similar to his voice. It sounded like him a little bit, and I think it was the NIV. And on especially books like this, where it's telling a narrative story, the translation is not as big an issue as it might be, for example, in a doctrinal letter like Romans or something like that. But yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. Some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, and some people will retain it better if they hear it. Probably if you do both, it's going to increase that. So yeah, that's a good thought. All right. Originally, this was one book. Instead of 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel being 2 distinct books, it was written as one book. Same with Kings and Chronicles. And it was not until the Greek translation called the Septuagint, not until that translation of the Old Testament was made, until that time it was one book, and then it was divided. The reason it was divided is because of the length of the scroll on which it was written. Greek took up more space than the Hebrew, and so they ran out of space. And so they wrote it on 2 scrolls. And if you read it, you just keep going from 1 Samuel into 2 Samuel. You don't see a difference. It just is a continuation of the story. It is called Samuel. Not because Samuel is the author, though he may have written some of it, but because he is the first major character in the book. You have 3 major characters in 1st and 2nd Samuel. You have Samuel, Saul, and David. And so it carries his name because his name is first. The book of Genesis. What does the word Genesis mean? Beginning. And hence, it's the book of beginnings. Exodus. What is the main topic of the book of Exodus? Leaving Egypt, the Exodus. And so that's the way many of those books got their names, and Samuel is one of them. Now, yeah. He is present. Yes. Yeah, he's Samuel is present throughout all of it. That is true. Yeah. And we'll get into the purpose of the book and what it does. And so he is without question one of the principal characters in the story. And so I don't know that I would say he's more prominent than, say, David, because obviously David is far more prominent once he comes on the scene throughout the rest of biblical history. But I was going to say, 1 Samuel 25 and verse 1 talks about the fact that Samuel was a prophet all the days of his life. And I don't know I can't remember if chapter 25 is the death of Samuel or if he continues past that. Maybe he continues past that. But let me just turn over and look at it. Yeah, verse 1 is when Samuel died. So he does not continue into 2 Samuel, but he is, without question, a major character in the book. But let me add another passage. 1 Chronicles 29 and verse 29 talks about what all David did and the record of David's exploits. And it mentions things that were written by Gad, Nathan, and Samuel. And so it's very possible that some of this was written by Samuel. The truth is, we don't know who wrote the book. We're not given the author's name. And there's nothing wrong with that. We can accept it as inspired writing without knowing who actually wrote it or pulled it together. And so, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the background stuff like that because it really doesn't change how we view the book. And I've made that point with the minor prophets as well. But the book also is a transition between the judges, the period of the judges, and the period of the monarchy, where there is a king. And of course, when chapter 8 of 1 Samuel is where the people come to Samuel and say, give us a king like the nations around us. And so it kind of serves as a bridge, getting you from the period of the judges to the period of the kingdom. And further, you kind of see the reason why it is needed. Throughout the book of Judges, you have, basically a period of moral chaos, where you have people that are simply not living as they ought. That gets them into trouble. They cry out to God. Remember the cycle of the judges. And God raises a judge. That's not the way we think of the word judge, because we think of somebody sitting behind a bench in a courtroom. That's not the judge of the Old Testament. This is a leader who delivers the people from bondage. And many of those judges were certainly not the kind of people that God wanted leading his people continually. And so you've got that situation that then bridging across to that to where you have a king, and Samuel is at the very heart of that transition. That's one thing we'll notice in our study of the book. And so you when the book opens, you have Eli as the judge. And what do you know about Eli's family life? Now, he was not a good father. What was his son's name? Do you remember them? Hophni and Phinehas, or Phinehas, depending on how you pronounce it. I don't know how he pronounced it. And they were not good people. And Eli had not restrained them. That's what God said about him. He's the next to the last judge. And then he has a hand in bringing to his adulthood Samuel, who is the last judge. Because you remember, after Samuel was weaned from his mother, she brought him to the tabernacle, and he stayed there and he served the Lord. And apparently under the tutelage of Eli. And so Samuel becomes the final judge. And it is during this time that Israel goes from a group of tribes to a united nation under a king. First Saul, and then after that David. Also, the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel further the development of God's promise to Abraham. You begin, some of that fulfillment has already taken place. He's going to make of him a great nation. That's the nation of Israel. Give them the land in which he was dwelling. That's where they're now living. But the third part of that promise, and the ultimate reason for the promise, was the coming of Christ. And in 1st and 2nd Samuel, you're going to have the development of the house of David and the Davidic line that ultimately brings Christ into the world. You have God's promise in 2 Samuel chapter 7, where David is telling God, I want to build a house for you. You know, all these other places have these places worship, and we're in a tent. And so, first of all, God tells him, did I ask you for that? Did I ever tell you I needed something like that? But he said, let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to build you a house, not a physical house, but a dynasty that ultimately will produce the Messianic king. And of course, that's exactly what happened. So from this point forward, throughout the rest of the Old Testament, you see that developed, and it eventually comes to fruition with the birth and life of Jesus. One more thought on the background. The major theme of the book really is, who is the true king of Israel? Do you remember the statement that ends the book of Judges? Chapter 21, verse 25. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. That was also stated in chapter 17, verse 6. And between chapter 17, verse 6 and the end of the book is some pretty rough stuff. I mean, some pretty terrible things that people did and the ways they lived. And so that's the situation at the beginning of the book of 1 Samuel. In fact, in the Hebrew Bible, the book that follows the book of Judges is the book of Samuel. What is between Judges and Samuel in our Bible? Ruth. In the Hebrew Bible, it's in a different section. It's called the Writings. Books like Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Proverbs, Ruth. There's a number of books there. And so it's not in the same order. The reason Ruth is where it is in our Bible show a contrast between the book of Judges and the book of Ruth. Same time period. And not everybody during that time period were like the people that are described in Judges. You have people like Boaz and Naomi and that family. There are those people. We often use the term the faithful remnant. And so Ruth pictures the faithful remnant in contrast to the unfaithfulness of the people in the days of the Judges. So when you leave the book of Judges, there was no king in Israel in those days. And every man did that which was right in his own eyes. I think one of the purposes of Judges is to show the need for that type of leadership that ultimately comes in people like David and those who followed in his footsteps. Of course, not every king that came was faithful to God. Certainly none of those kings were perfect, but they set the stage for and brought about, ultimately, God sent his son to set up his kingdom. All right, so chapter 4, verse 18, right toward the end of chapter 4, is the death of Eli. He was the judge at the beginning of the book of 1 Samuel, and Samuel then takes his place. Chapter 7, verse 15 is the passage I was looking for a moment ago. It says Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. So from very early on, he was involved in being prepared for and then taking the place of being a judge. Now, chapter 8 is when the people come to Samuel and say, we want a king. Now, generally speaking, and I did it a minute ago, generally speaking, when we talk about them asking for a king, it is in a very negative context. That the people were wanting to be like the nations around them. And there is a negative sense in there, because when Samuel takes that problem to God, because it upset Samuel when they asked for it. And God tells him, they've not rejected you, they have rejected me. So their request for a king ultimately is not a good thing. But there's something about what prompted them to come to Samuel that kind of gives you an idea that it kind of makes sense that they are concerned. We talked already about Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, that they were not good, they were vile men. But when the people come to Samuel, they say, your sons are not walking in your footsteps. And your sons are not the kind of people we want ruling over us. And so in that context, they say, give us a king, like the nations around us have a king. And so it's not entirely all negative. There is that recognition that we need better leadership than what your sons are going to provide. And so what happens? Chapter 9, we're introduced to Saul. And what do you know about Saul at the very beginning of his introduction to us in the book of 1 Samuel? He was a very tall man, heads and shoulders above everybody else, a very handsome man. He physically is the picture of a king, and that's the way he's presented. At first, he is very humble. You remember when he was being presented, they couldn't find him. You know, here it is, go present him as the king, and he's hiding among the baggage of the King James Version. He was, you know, but that changes very quickly. There's some character flaws in Saul. But one commentator puts it this way, or one of the websites I looked at. God gave them a man after their own heart in Saul. And it doesn't take long for it to be evident that that's exactly what Saul is. Look over at chapter 10. I jotted that passage down. This is when they're proclaiming him as king and they can't find him. Verse 22, he's hidden among the equipment. So they ran and brought him. He stood among the people. He was taller than any of the people from his shoulders upward. And Samuel said to all the people, do you see him whom the Lord has chosen, that there is none like him among all the people? And so God gave them the kind of king they were seeking. But he also gave it with a warning. Because Samuel told them, chapter 8, this is what your king is going to do. He's going to take your sons and put them in his army. He's going to take your servants and in essence, take them as his own servants. He's going to tax you. And all of this is the way and that's exactly what Saul did. And that's what the kings did. Then when you get to chapter 16, after Saul has finally broken with God, and God has rejected him, you have Samuel sent to the house of Jesse. And he sees Jesse's oldest, I think his name was Abinadab. And he said, surely this is the one that God has chosen. And it's, of course, you're very familiar with verse 7 of 1 Samuel 16, where God warned Samuel, don't look on the outward appearance, because I look on the heart. And instead, David is the one who is chosen. Look at chapter 13, at verse number 14. This is where Samuel is telling Saul, God has rejected you, and your kingdom will not continue. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be commander over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. And so there's that phrase that Paul will use in Acts chapter 13. That, where's that Peter? Peter or Paul 1 uses that in Acts 13. And says that David was a man after God's own heart. That's what God was looking for. And so when he establishes David as king, he gives them a man after his own heart. But ultimately, in the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, we see that God is the one who's in charge. So let's go back to Judges chapter 21, verse 25, where the writer of the book of Judges says, in those days there was no king in Israel. We have to understand that in the sense in which he was writing. There was not an earthly king in those days. But did Israel have a king? Yes, they had a king, and they would always have a king. God was in control even when the people were rebellious, and even when the people were sinful, and even when they came to Samuel and said, give us a king. And he gave them an earthly king. Ultimately, God was the one in charge. He was in control of all of those things. So I think that's one of the major themes, perhaps the major theme in the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel, that as we consider this idea of the monarchy and the development of the kingdom, that ultimately God is the one who is in control. Let me stop there. I've got a map for us to look at. I've got a couple of outlines to kind of give us an idea. We'll close out tonight by looking at some themes we will get through the book. But anything that anybody wants to bring up, question or comment or anything. All right. Here is a map. I had a different one, but it's a colored map and you really couldn't see anything. So here are a lot of the cities that we'll be talking about throughout our study of the book. Right here is Ramah. It's just north of Jerusalem, north a little bit east of Jerusalem. This is where Samuel was born and where he spent the majority of his life. This is where his parents were from. Shiloh is right here. And that is the place where the tabernacle was located during the majority of this time until David moved the capital city to Jerusalem, which was just south of there. You also have over here some of the Philistine cities, Ekron, Gath, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza. Chapter 4 in chapter 5, when the ark is captured by the Philistines, those are the cities that will be involved. And so we may refer back, and if I can find a better one, here's your homework for this week. Look for a really, really good map of 1st and 2nd Samuel. I've looked for a couple of days, and I had that one I liked, but because of the colors, you couldn't see it. If you find something, send it to me, and I'll see if we can use it. All right, so let's talk about a couple of outlines. This one emphasizes the idea of the king. Chapters 1 through 8, the people demand a king. That's kind of where that section concludes. Chapters 9 through 15, the king is delivered to them in the person of Saul. And then finally, chapter 16 through the end of the second book, God demonstrates the kind of king that he had in mind for the people in the person of David. And I think I've got I've got another one. This one emphasizes the personalities. I've talked about that already. Samuel, Saul, and David. And really, David starts in the section that deals with Saul because there's an overlap, of course, between Saul and David, and a great deal of interaction between them. And that leads me to the next thought. This is something I saw in one of the videos that I watched. I thought was really good. There are three distinct, or at least, three distinct rise and fall stories throughout these two books. The first one is the fall of the house of Eli, because he's the judge at the beginning, and you see his family deteriorate and ultimately come to an end, all in one day. In chapter 4, when the ark is captured by the Philistines, and somebody who comes from the battle comes back to tell what had happened. Both Hophni and Phinehas are killed in the battle. And when Eli hears that, also he hears that the ark has been captured, what does he do? Anybody remember? Yeah, he falls backward off of his seat, breaks his neck, and he dies. So Hophni, Phinehas, Eli all die on that same day. Now, as that family is falling apart or is coming to an end, you have the rise of Samuel. What was Samuel's mother's name? Hannah. And what was her husband's name? Elkanah or Elkanah. And this is where we'll be next week. I'll go ahead and kind of introduce it. Hannah could not have children. And so she goes to the tabernacle, she prays. God hears her prayer. She has the child Samuel. She made the promise, if you give me a son, I will give him back to you all the days of his life. And that's exactly what happened. So early chapters, you see the growth of Samuel. It sounds very similar to Luke chapter 2. In fact, there is a statement in the early, either first or second, or maybe the third chapter. Third chapter or second chapter, I'm sorry. Chapter 2, verse 21. The child Samuel grew before the Lord. And then in chapter 2 and verse 26, the child Samuel grew in stature and in favor, both with the Lord and men. And that's reminiscent of what we said of Jesus in Luke chapter 2. And so Samuel's growing. Samuel is increasing in his influence. And as Anthony pointed out, he continues throughout the rest of the book, and he is always in good favor. There's nothing negative about Samuel throughout the rest of the book. He is always the one who's coming to Saul. Like, what did you do? Why did you do this? And he's always the one that is reminding the people of the necessity of being faithful to God. Then when Saul is selected as king, the next few chapters show his rise. He's victorious in battle, and he is pulling the people together. But then he makes a fatal decision. Chapter 13, he is impatient. Samuel has told him to wait for me, and I will offer a sacrifice. Samuel was a priest. Saul didn't have the right to do that. He gets impatient. He takes it upon himself to do that and meets with God's disfavor. Chapter 15 is when he spares Agag and the best of the flocks and herds when God told him to utterly destroy the Amalekites. It's at that point that God says, because you've rejected me, I've rejected you as king. And so you see Saul do this and then do this. And then in the midst of all that, you have David anointed as king. And so you have David's rise. But just like Saul, David makes some very serious blunders. Of course, on his way up, as he is rising, what is one of the events that probably is one of the best known stories from the book of 1 Samuel, it's in chapter 17, when the Philistines and the Israelites are encamped against each other. And yes, when he slays Goliath. And so you see David increasing in his influence, and it causes the problem between he and Saul, because the people are saying Saul has killed his thousands, David has killed his 10,000s, and Saul can't handle that. And so there's that jealousy there, and all the interaction between Saul and David take place. But then what is the one event that stands out in your mind that where David made a very bad choice and it ultimately brings his family down? Yeah, the adultery with Bathsheba. And not just that, but also the attempt to hide it and cover it up. And he has her husband killed. And so God says, because you've done this, these are the consequences that come upon your family. And so you have the rise and the fall of these people. And one of the lessons that teaches is the fact that there is no one on earth who can lead the people of God and provide for the people of God everything that they need. There is one who can do that and obviously does that, and that's the Messiah, the Christ, Jesus, who came and fulfilled all the promises, the prophecies that were made beforehand. So, anything else before we go to the last thought? We'll look at some of the themes in the book. Anthony?
It's kind of interesting talking about the rise of the law. Saul never really apologized for his mistake.
Yep.
David did.
Mm-hmm.
And he turned his heart to
Mm-hmm.
God. And God allowed him to rise back up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lesson there. Whereas, when Saul, God elevated him. Saul recognized it. Then he made his mistakes. And when he was informed of his mistakes, he refused to accept the responsibility and turn back to God. So he was cut off.
Mm-hmm.
David, the same thing. He rose and he failed and he sinned, but he recognized and took accountability for it and he turned his heart back to God. So he was able to come back. Even though, that still leaned over his family, he still was a man after God's own heart.
Right. Yes. And that's the major difference between Saul and David. The fact that Saul was arrogant and proud, David was humble.
I think it was Saul had looked at himself when Samuel came to him and told him what he'd done, had the humility like David, that he could have, his brain could have lasted longer, but he didn't have that. He didn't have that humility. He didn't have that
Yeah.
sense to realize that I've sinned before God, therefore I need to
Well, that's exactly what Samuel told him. Go back to chapter 13. And this is when Samuel says to Saul, "You've done foolishly and have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart." And if Saul had been willing to do that and be that man, then God would have continued his kingdom.
Well, obviously, Saul's heart was hardened.
Mm-hmm.
Did God have hand in his heart being hardened?
Probably in the same way that he hardened Pharaoh's heart. If you remember from Exodus, you'll have the statement, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And then you have the statement, Pharaoh hardened his heart. God did it in the sense that he provided those things that ultimately caused Pharaoh to turn and harden. It's not that God did that to a man that wanted to do right and he couldn't do otherwise. That's not the case. God gave him the opportunity, and in that sense he hardened. It's the same with Saul and David. God didn't treat those men differently. They responded differently to what God did. And as a result, you have the fact that one became hardened, simply refused to do what God wanted, followed his own way. And the other man, though he at times followed his own way, saw the error in that and turned and came back to him. And you can't read Psalm 32 and Psalm 51 without seeing the heart of David, that here is a man who is humbled when he sees his error and his mistake. David?
I think David is a very good, how you would say it, it's refreshing, I guess, in some ways to know that everything that David did, he was still a man after God's own will. Many times we look at the sin and we go, we cancel people out and all the stuff they did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
David was known as a good king because he strived to follow God's will. We can do the same thing. We're going to make mistakes the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And you read David's story, you go, wow, that was big. That was something big. Well, we all sometimes sin. It's not got a big or a little.
Right.
So we do stuff every day and mess up. Thank goodness, the example of David, we see God is not expecting us to be perfect. He expects our effort to be flawless.
Yeah, and that's a lesson that many people can't grasp. I was reading something this past week about Jeffrey Dahmer. If you remember the name Jeffrey Dahmer, he was a serial killer, but in prison, he was contacted by a Christian. He obeyed the gospel, and the comments people made about that, there's no way that man could be in heaven. Oh, yes, there is. And that way is the blood of Jesus Christ, in the same way that you or I could be there. And I think that's one of the things that God does in these books like 1st and 2nd Samuel, is to show us that no matter how bad he messed up, if he turned to God, he could be forgiven. All right, any other thoughts? I want to do this real quick before Roger rings the next buzzer. I made it sound like it's his fault. Yeah, I know. 4 minutes. Can we unplug the clock? They do that in Montgomery sometimes. All right, here's a chronology, kind of gives you an idea. And Anthony, what you were saying earlier, you see Samuel goes well into the life of David, almost to the end of Saul's life, and right toward the end of the book of 1 Samuel. I'll use this throughout our study at times. All right, here's some of the themes. We talked about the sovereignty of God already, but I wanted to mention, for example, Hannah in chapter 1, verse 5, God closed her womb. And then chapter 1, verse 19, he remembered Hannah. And that's when Samuel was conceived and she was able to have a child. And so God was involved in their lives. He actually involved himself in either closing her womb or allowing her to have a child. In chapter 5, when the ark was captured, it's almost humorous, but it's not, because the Philistines capture the ark, they take it home, and they put it in the temple of their god Dagon. And they get there the next day, and what's happened to Dagon? Just like Eli fell off of his seat, Dagon falls off his seat, and he breaks. And so they end up sending it to another city, and that city says, no, we don't want it, send it to another city. And the people are affected, and we don't really know exactly what it was. It was something terrible that happened to them. One of the commentaries I looked at said it might have been the bubonic plague or something like the bubonic plague, because you remember when they sent it back, they had little gold representations of whatever was wrong with them, and rats, which you remember that's what carried bubonic plague. But God was the one who was in charge of all of that. You see his sovereignty throughout the book, and that's something we'll try to point out as well. We've also talked about the development of the monarchy as God gives them a king, then he gives them the kind of king that he wants them to have. The role of the prophet becomes more prominent throughout the rest of the Old Testament, and it begins here in Samuel. And then, of course, there are messianic expectations that come to the front as God makes the promise to David that he would give him or make of him a house. All right, so those are some of the themes we'll see throughout the book as well. And I've got a minute left, or maybe 2 minutes. Yeah. So anybody have anything you want to add, a question you want to raise? Next week we will start back at chapter 1, and we'll look at the story of Elkanah and Hannah, the birth of Samuel, and probably look at least into the second or third chapter, kind of the beginnings of Samuel's life and his work with Eli in the tabernacle. Calvin.
Some of these things are very hard for us to grasp because the way God dealt with the people back then and the way he offers, plan of salvation today and what we can do to get to heaven. We've got the book, we've got the guideline, and sometimes I'm not saying my faith is challenged, but just the way God would handle, like David with Bathsheba, he committed adultery with her. He did all this. He was forgiven, but yet he let him keep Bathsheba, and she was instrumental in who the next king would be. The way God handled all those things, sometimes it's hard for us to grasp because he's God and we're not.
Right. And that's something we can look at as we get into those parts of the book. All right. I hope this is going to be a study that's helpful to us. And again, encourage you to read those first few chapters so that you'll have that in mind as we study next week. If you will, take a songbook and turn to number 461. 461. Wes will lead that invitation song in just a few moments. At the close of our service, John Holly has our closing prayer. Have a number of people to mention on our sick list tonight. Start with Philip Barnett. This is John and Sharon's son's father-in-law. We mentioned a few weeks back they had scheduled a surgery for an aneurysm. They were not able to do that. They did that this week, and the surgery went well. They had moved him in out of intensive care, or in the process of moving him out of intensive care, but everything looks good, and we're certainly thankful for that. Certainly want to keep that family in your prayers. Clayton Mize, nephew of John Whisenant, still at Children's, but still showing improvement, so we're thankful for that. Lorelei Maxwell is at home sick tonight. Remember, Cassidy Whisenant will be undergoing foot surgery on the 19th, so that's coming up fairly soon. Nell Childers is not feeling well. She's dealing with sickness. Also, Carlton and Nita. We mentioned that Nita suffered a fall. Recently, she's suffering. She's hurting from that, so be sure and keep them in your prayers as well. And Kira gave me this information. Chris Collins, this is a nephew of Chad Collins. Some of you may know Chad, is scheduled to undergo triple bypass surgery either tomorrow or Friday of this week. And they ask that we keep him in our prayers as well. Are there others that we need to add to that tonight? Oh, I'm sorry, Elena. Amanda did tell me, and I didn't write it down immediately. So Jackson is home sick tonight. Anybody else? Let me write it now so I don't forget to write it later. All right, some things that we have coming up. Jonathan said that the sign-up sheet for the youth group kickoff, which will be on Friday the 30th, the sign-up sheet is on the youth bulletin board. If you plan to be a part of that, and that's not just for the kids, that's for the parents also, giving you an idea of what they have coming up, what they're going to be doing this year. Again, the date is the 30th, and that starts at 5:30. If you plan to be a part of that, be sure and sign up on that list on the bulletin board. Preparing homeless meals this Saturday, 9:30 in the fellowship hall. If you want to be a part of that, you come help put that together. If you want to help take it over and give it out, talk to Wes or Dale about doing that. Also, remember the luncheon for Ryan, in honor of Ryan and Sabrina Dearman. That will be on Sunday the 18th. And we're also putting together, I don't know that we've announced this yet, we're putting together a basket of gift cards for Luke and Savannah Nordvik. Luke and Savannah moved into our community not too long ago. They've been attending with us. When they're here, they're sitting right back in this area. She is expected, or they are expecting, and she should deliver sometime this week. So we're putting together those gift cards. If you'd like to do that, you can give that to Regina. If you have any questions about it, come see either her or me, and we can let you know what you need to know concerning that. And also, right after we dismiss tonight, Regina needs to meet with any of the ladies or anybody who would like to help prepare meals for Carlton and Nita over the next few weeks to help her out because of the fall that she recently suffered. So if you can meet right down here after we dismiss about that. Just a couple more things. We've got Tommy Earwood told me that Linda Hyatt, she was a member at Grandiflora, passed away today. Don't have arrangements on that, but some of you may know her, and so you can. The arrangements will be made later, but keep that family in your prayers. And also, Dustin's grandmother's funeral is tomorrow at 2:00. Visitation starts at 1:00. And that will be at the Roselawn Funeral Home in Decatur. Again, his grandmother is Shirley Fairbanks, And so continue to keep Dustin in your prayers, that family as well. And if you plan to be a part of the funeral, that's at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon at Roselawn Funeral Home in Decatur. That's all that I've got as far as announcements for right now. The song that we mentioned that Wes is going to be leading, 461, there's a great day coming. Depending upon where you are in your spiritual life, you are the subject of one of those verses. Because it says there's a great day coming. We think about it in that sense, we think about it as a wonderful thing, a good thing, something I'm anticipating, something I'm looking forward to. And there are people who can look at that day as a great day to anticipate, one to look forward to, one that I'm thankful is coming. But the song also talks about it as a sad day. And for some people, it will indeed be a sad day. It'll probably, for many, be a surprising day. Because there's a group of people who don't think it'll ever happen. Peter even wrote about people like that in 1 Peter chapter 3. There will be people who think, I don't really have anything to worry about, and find out on the day of judgment that indeed that's not the case. It's a sad day. What makes the difference is where we stand with God. Our standing with God determines what the day of judgment will be for us. And the only way to know that your standing with God is as it ought to be is to follow what the Bible teaches. Tonight as we sing this song, if you find that you're not living by that, you know you're not prepared for that day, you know you need to make changes, this gives you an opportunity to do that. We'll pray with you and for you if that's what you need. If you need to obey the gospel, we'll assist you in that as well. There's a great day coming. Make sure it is for you a great day. And if you need to come, do it right now while we stand, while we sing.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your love. Dear Lord, you care for us. You see after us. You bless us so much. Dear Lord, we ask that you continue to love us and care for us each day. Dear Lord, we ask that you help us be examples in our community of loving people, willing to share the good news of you and the path that every individual can have because of that love, to have a home with you one day. Dear Lord, there's been many spoken of this evening that are going through trials and surgeries and sickness. We ask that you be with them and their caregivers. Dear Lord, we ask that you help motivate us each day to seek your kingdom, to be a part of your kingdom, and to be more like you. Dear Lord, as we depart tonight, we ask that you go with us, take care of us. In Christ's name, amen.
He's up here talking about,